think of it like building a building. You're laying down brick by brick. Every single time you do this priming, you're showing your brain that, oh, that's the reality that's existing now. And what's neat about that is that, just like you mentioned, getting in the car and driving automatically because you've done it so much, your brain has this system. It's called a reticular activating system, that its only job is to filter in to your conscious awareness what you believe, what aligns with what you believe, which is not a great thing when you have those limiting stories or traps, right? But when you do this brain priming, and you're priming in your vision, or you're priming in the truth around belief that wasn't serving you well before, now you're actually telling your brain this is happening now. And your brain says, great, okay. After some repeating of this, then your brain starts filtering in things that were always there, but you actually just couldn't see them before.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade-thinking beer-brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klink proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klink.
Hey there, welcome to episode 70 of the Online Genius Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink. Wow, I can't believe this is the 70th episode of this show, and I'm really excited because today's episode is a really good one. We are talking about the mental crap that gets in our way as entrepreneurs and what we need to do to deal with it. And, specifically, we're going to talk about limiting beliefs and something called brain priming and how to really kind of, set yourself up for success and how, to do it from a mindset standpoint. But I'm not going to do this episode alone. This is an episode where I brought on a guest who I met through my mastermind, James Wedmore's Inner Circle Mastermind. Her name is Shannon Irvine. She's actually a PhD, a doctor, and she helps people with these things. So Dr. Shannon Irvine is an entrepreneur, high achievement mentor, host of the Epic Success podcast, and has a PhD in neuro-psychology. She helps her clients neuro-hack their success and build an epic life and business that they love by harnessing the power of the brain to hardwire productivity, goal attainment, and high-performance mindset mastery. Through her courses, programs, and Epic Success podcast, her clients learn the power of neuro-achievement, her process for shifting how to think, act, and grow so they can achieve anything they desire. They learn how to hardwire what they want and delete anything that's holding them back. Her mission is to help entrepreneurs go for the go for their God-given dreams by giving them the step-by-step blueprint to go from dream to launch in a way that honors what they value most. Now, I met I'm just going to call her Shannon, but I met her through this mastermind. We'd kind of interacted before that online in various places, and we had kind of crossed paths, but I have really enjoyed getting to know her better because she brings the science to the stuff that I think otherwise people might think of as woo. In other words, the mindset, all of those issues. And in this episode, in this interview, which I think was really great, she walks through how to do what she calls priming or brain priming to really get yourself set for success. Her idea, and she makes an analogy, is that basically in your mind, you have built these kind of roadways. Think of them as highways from, all of your history, all of your past, and all of those things. And you've probably heard this when it comes to habits and things like that. And I talked about the analogy or not the analogy, the situation that if you think about it, when you go on and like turn your car on and then drive your car, if you commute somewhere every day, you don't even think about it. It's just kind of second nature. It's a habit. Well, we know about that with behavior. Well, Shannon talks about how the same thing happens with our beliefs, with our mindset, with all of those things. We have built those kinds of highways through habit, through things we've done in our past. And she wants to help you and other entrepreneurs get out of those habits when they're not useful to you. So, she helps people deal with things like limiting beliefs and how to kind of overcome the limiting beliefs. And, I think the big one that most entrepreneurs deal with is, am I good enough? Am I worthy? And it kind of rears its head in a lot of different places, but she helps people with that. And so she does that. She does brain priming. And, as I mentioned during the interview, I was someone who, I've said many times that I think I'm a recovering blockhead. And what I mean by that is I was always someone who was very type A and just didn't think that my mind got in my way. And I had been at these events where people cried and I never quite got it. I never understood it. And I never really had it hit home. That is until, Shannon did her work with us at our first retreat in this mastermind. And it actually brought up, she wasn't even talking to me. She was kind of, doing it with someone else, but seeing her go through the process and I was, trying to internalize it, it brought up a big thing for me. Right? Which was that I realized that I worked so hard that I was addicted to my work because I felt guilty. I felt guilty about having made the decision to leave a very comfortable, very stable, environment of big law firms where I would have comfortably been making over $500,000 for, I don't know, probably the last 7 to 8 years and probably $750,000 for the last couple or few years. And I would have done that and had this very easy path. But I made the decision to get off of that path because I didn't like it, because I didn't enjoy it. And so her going through this process made me realize that I was actually doing that and working so hard because I felt that guilt. I felt a need to justify my decision to show, see, I'm still working hard. I'm still trying to do this. I'm putting in the hours, so don't be mad about it. And it helped me realize that made no sense because let's be honest, I got out of that grind because I wanted to be with my family more. And yet I was still not doing it. So going through the process with her was hugely valuable for me. I talk about it a little bit during the interview, but I wanted to share that with you because she is someone who has amazing value and her process works. So that's what we're going to do in today's episode. But before we get there, as always, this week's episode is brought to you by the Online Genius podcast community on Facebook. Again, I love coming to you with these episodes on a weekly basis, whether it's just me or with a guest like this week. It's a great chance for me to kind of share knowledge and share information with you. But quite honestly, I want to engage with you. I don't want to talk at you. I want to talk with you. And the best way for me to do that is for you to join the Facebook community. It's where, we can have trainings where I can answer questions and I can answer questions for you. We can talk, talk through different things. And it's not just about the legal stuff, but that stuff's there. I mean, if you want to talk about that, we can talk about the legal stuff. But in reality, it's about much more. It's about the marketing. It's about everything in your business. So I hope you'll join me. It's absolutely free. You can join by heading over to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community. You can join me there, start interacting, asking questions, etc. I would love to see you there. And without further ado, let's dive into my interview with Dr. Shannon Irvine. Welcome to the show, Shannon. I am so excited to have you here. I think you're going to provide an incredible amount of value for my listeners.
Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you.
Now, so listeners, if you don't know, Shannon and we had kind of interacted and somehow our paths had crossed, I guess I'd say passively online. Mm-hmm. But then we're in the same mastermind with James Wedmore this year. And so I've gotten to see her in action and her stuff is really powerful. But, Shannon, in the intro, I'm sure I didn't do it justice. So why don't you explain to my listeners kind of what it is that you do and how you help entrepreneurs really kind of, build their businesses to the next level?
Sure. Yeah. I love working with entrepreneurs to help them really tap in and basically program the way their brain is wired so that they can get to their results faster and easier without all the stress, without all the overwhelm, without all the self-doubt and all of the voices that we have in our heads as entrepreneurs as we're putting ourselves out there. And I do that through a process of what's called a mind matrix, where we really break down, let's call them traps, or just things that are getting in our way that we don't even realize are getting in our way. And that is when we were younger, maybe young or, teenage years, maybe a little bit older than that, we created some identities. And those identities we have actually programmed and made automatic in our subconscious. And what we've learned through neuroscience is that 80 to 90% of your daily actions and decisions are actually being run from that part of your brain, which is fantastic if you have taken your thoughts off autopilot, if you've actively created the type of thinking that you need to get to your next level, and that you're priming that in your brain every single day, which 99.9% of entrepreneurs are not doing. So that's when it becomes a little bit of a challenge, because usually what we've programmed to keep us safe, I mean, it's not your fault, right? We do this as we're young just to protect us. Our brain wants to keep us safe, wants to keep things familiar. So we tell ourselves things like, I don't have what it takes, or I'm not sure if I'm enough, or what will people think? And we say those things only internally, right? But we say them over and over and over and over again in your conscious thinking mind. And then your subconscious mind the conscious mind is the boss. So the subconscious mind goes, okay, got it. That's what she believes, or that's what he believes, that he doesn't have what it takes. I'll automate that. And so it now takes that limiting belief, or that belief that's not going to get you where you want to go, and it's now put that belief on autopilot, and that type of belief is running 80 to 90% of your business. And we're wondering, why am I not getting it? Or why isn't it going the way that I want it to go? Or what's wrong with me? And that's what I hear the most. Like, why have they figured it out? And why haven't I? And the reality is, it's because you have some faulty programming that you're not aware of, and it's running your business. And we just need to get in there through this mind matrix process, reveal it and remove it, so that you can really prime yourself to get to the vision that you have for your life and for your business.
Well, and I love that. And there's a lot of things there I want to dig into. But the first thing I want to dig into is that the way you describe it, in many ways, reminds me of when you think about habits, things that just become natural. And the example that I've seen so many times in habit books is things like getting in your car, starting it, and driving somewhere. If you drive to work every day, in reality, you're doing that on autopilot.
Yep.
And what you're saying is that's happening throughout your business. Mm-hmm. And so it's not even like limiting beliefs anymore, because you're not even conscious that you're doing
it. Right. Not even conscious of it. And that's the thing that holds, we're, as entrepreneurs, we're always looking for the thing outside of ourselves, right? We're looking for the system or the strategy or all of that. But the reality, Bobby, is that I can point to multiple 6 and 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, and I can tell you, without even knowing them, I bet I know how they market their business. It's probably with webinars or video series or some mechanism to book a call for a high ticket program. And I can also tell you that's the exact same strategy that failing entrepreneurs are using.
Yep.
So the difference, what I've discovered truly, is in how those multiple 6, 7, and 8 figure entrepreneurs think. The fact that they have, some accidentally and some on purpose, have rewired the way their brain is reacting to those limiting beliefs. They've removed them, and then everything becomes possible. But for most entrepreneurs, here's what's going on. We're driven, right? We have goals, we have dreams, and it's like driving in a car with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake at the same time, and not even realizing that your foot is on the brake and wondering why you're not getting where you want to go. Yeah. And that's what so many entrepreneurs struggle with. And if I could show you a brain scan image, it's the neural networks that get built that creates this automation in our subconscious. It's like a freeway. So if you think the thought once or twice, you're not building a freeway. But as you've repeated it over and over and over again, that energy starts firing together. And the more it fires together, the more it wires. And over time, through those words and through pictures that you vividly imagine, you actually build this freeway that's taking you away from the very thing you want. You have this, we call it cognitive dissonance. You have this desire, this passion, this dream. You want to help, you want to change lives, but yet at the same time, you've got this program that's obviously a faulty program that you didn't create. Well, you did create it, but you didn't know you created it, right? And it is driving your business. So what I love getting to do is helping entrepreneurs just, first of all, become aware that they're the creator of their thoughts. That's huge. That it's not, that life and business isn't just happening to us. You actually have complete control based on what you think. Mm-hmm. And that thinking combines with emotion and becomes a belief. That belief over time affects what decisions you make and what actions you take. It's where your identity is. So if you have all these thoughts of, and the common ones I hear all the time, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is, I'm not sure if I can do this. I don't know if I have what it takes. A big one is, what will people think? What if I put my thing out there and people don't like it? And that means I'm a failure. So we have these stories, right, around what it means to be successful, around what it means to fail, and around what money means. I mean, that one is like a big one, because we have these automatic programming that we just learned from environment. I mean, I know growing up, in my family, it was, you have to work really, 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 really hard to earn money, and only enough money. Right. So just enough. So that was automated for me. So all of a sudden and it's interesting because you can get rewarded a little bit for that, but it doesn't get you to a successful business. So I was able to grow a fairly decently successful business, but then I hit a massive wall and I could not go past it. Yep. And I had to get in, and I had to really go after these thoughts that were telling me, first of all, it's not true that you have to work hard to be very, very successful.
Yeah. And the interesting thing to me is a lot of this, I mean, a lot of what you're talking about, I think a lot of people can see that this is happening to them. Mm-hmm. But when you took us through the process at our first retreat with the mastermind, it actually brought something up different for me that I literally was completely unconscious about. I wasn't even conscious that it was there. It wasn't, I wasn't sure why I thought that. And I shared this with you that for a long time, I'd struggled with being a workaholic. Literally, I worked on the weekends. I was constantly at my desk, and it was this weird tension. My wife was upset about it, not happy about it.
Right.
And it was this weird thing because it was directly contrary to why I became an entrepreneur, right? I wanted to control my life.
Right.
And then I realized that it was actually coming from a place of guilt. You helped me through your process of realizing that I felt guilty because I had made choices to forego a big law firm where I would have been making like $750,000 consistently for the last few years. Mm-hmm. And I had given that up. And so I, at some base level, had convinced myself, which I didn't realize, that I needed to actually justify that decision. And working hard was my way of showing, hey, it's not it's not my fault that I'm not making that much money right now. And so it really brought that up for me, which again, that was not a limiting belief I had any idea that was there.
Yeah. And it was running you, and it was running your relationship, and it was running your business.
Yep.
And here's the cool thing. A lot of people will say, Shannon, don't we want to not focus on those things? What you focus on grows. And that's very, very true. Even from a neurological standpoint, I can show you that it actually does.
Yep.
But here's the thing. If you've got a limiting belief like that one that was starting to drive everything that you did, and you don't pull it out of the subconscious, it's going to run your day. 90% of it, it's going to run it. So for me, with my clients, I want to help them do exactly what you were able to get to, which is I want you to be able to see it. And then I want you to go after it because it's not true.
Right.
And then remove it.
Right. And again, I can honestly say that after that retreat, I came home and that weekend I didn't work at all, that was the first time I had not worked over the weekend in I don't even know how long.
Yeah.
And so again, being aware of it definitely helped. But, I want to talk about a couple of concepts that you mentioned way back in the first answer.
Mm-hmm.
The word priming. And can you explain what is priming and how does that fit into the puzzle?
Well, I love this question. I wish I could get this question all the time. So priming is something you're doing without realizing it right now. And that is every time you have a thought, every thought that you repeat over time is building that neural network. We've established that. So you're either building a neural network that's not taking you where you want to go, or you're building one that does. So priming is a way to consciously do that process. So what we do in priming is we work with either the truth around a limiting belief, or we prime in, and this is what we did with you, we prime in a vision, because here's the coolest thing in the world. Your brain does not know the difference between what's actually happening in reality and what you have repeatedly told it over and over and over again in word and picture, but very viscerally. So brain priming is going in and with texture, very viscerally, seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing. You're actually showing your brain exactly what it is that you believe is to be true in the future. And what happens is that you start think of it like building a building. You're laying down brick by brick. Every single time you do this priming, you're showing your brain that, oh, that's the reality that's existing now. And what's neat about that is that, just like you mentioned, getting in the car and driving automatically because you've done it so much, your brain has this system. It's called a reticular activating system, that its only job is to filter in to your conscious awareness what you believe, what aligns with what you believe, which is not a great thing when you have those limiting stories or traps, right? But when you do this brain priming, and you're priming in your vision, or you're priming in the truth around belief that wasn't serving you well before, now you're actually telling your brain this is happening now. And your brain says, great, okay, after some repeating of this, then your brain starts filtering in things that were always there, but you actually just couldn't see them before. And a lot of my clients, after they've been doing brain priming for like 20, 30 days, all of these opportunities start coming to them. And they're like, it's amazing. I'm like, no, you see that those things were there before, but you didn't have the identity of the person at the end of your vision. So you weren't available for it. Your brain couldn't see it. But because you've really given that picture of exactly what you wanted and what it feels like and what it tastes like and who's with you and who are you being and how are you showing up and how are you impacting, and really diving into that impact on a daily basis, then your brain says, okay, this is really happening. It doesn't know the difference. One of the things I talked about at our inner circle was just all the research that I've been able to do to prove out. And it is a proven concept now about the brain not knowing the difference, where we've taken piano players and put, one group sitting, playing piano, learning the scales and never learned them before. And the other group did this brain priming around learning the scales. And we took a scan of them beforehand and to see that there was no learned memory there. And then afterward, both groups had stored the information in their learned memory, even though the test group hadn't ever touched the keys. And then when we had them test on the scales on the actual piano, those that primed actually performed better than those who actually learned the scales physically. It's mind-blowing. And I could go on and on and on about different research that I've had the privilege to be a part of, but it's powerful. Like, we're looking outside of ourselves for something to fix our business or make it finally get to that next level. And it really, truly, honestly is already inside of you right now. You just need to learn how to harness it and put it to work for you, and be as passionate about priming that vision and priming those truths into your brain so your mind can start to bring that stuff to you faster and easier.
Well, and it's funny because as entrepreneurs, I mean, I have to admit, I was resistant for a long time. And listeners, I mean, to give you a sense, what I like to think of is that priming is kind of like, if you've ever heard the adage that you should write your goals down, say 50 times a day, but from the perspective of them already being done. Well, priming is the same kind of thing, except you're putting a lot more context to it and you're doing it in your mind. Well, we hear about athletes doing this all the time. I mean, Michael Phelps, for example, it's very famous that his coach would say, play the videotape, which is basically a videotape in his mind of him running swimming the perfect race.
Yep.
And we accept it there. Why is it that entrepreneurs seem to resist this and think that it maybe it's not for us?
I firmly believe the reason for this, and again, it's not your fault, but it's kind of how we grow up, right? That the answers are all outside of us, right, and that we get rewarded for hard work, right? Yep. So that pattern gets set in our mind. Now, if you're an athlete, interestingly, that pattern doesn't fully exist. You do have to do the work, like do the actual work of the sport, but the mental game is always a part of it from like young. And so there isn't a freeway built that says there's only one way to get success. And so for them, they realize all the greats, they have their physical game and they have their mental game. And given one or the other, they honestly will choose the mental game. And, I shared with you an athlete's research that I got to be a part of where it was a swimmer, an athlete, Olympian, and he agreed to prime to add this different level of a stroke. It's a technique that he wanted to add to his stroke. And we scanned his brain ahead of time. We also did a muscular conductivity test because in order for this stroke to actually work, there was a small twitch muscle that had to grow. And so we measured both, and then we primed in the studio with his coach the same amount of time he would normally be in the pool. He did not get in the pool for this at all. And it was about 62 days, I believe. I'd have to go back and look, but we did the scans again. We did the muscle conductivity test. We knew that the learned memory would be there because that research has just been, peer reviewed. It's very common that would be there. And it was. But the thing that blew us away was that small twitch muscle, which had no fiber growth beforehand, was 98.2% completely developed, and he never stepped in the pool. And as entrepreneurs, like that, if you could do that same thing with your business, and the interesting thing, Bobby, is this. I've had the privilege, because of having my own podcast, of talking to a lot of multiple 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs, and as well as my private practice, I get to do that as well. And hands down, they say the same exact thing that the athletes do. The thing that makes the difference is how I manage my mind, what I'm thinking about, how I manage those thoughts that aren't serving me. Personal development is their high goal, right? It's always learning, always growing. And that is the thing. That is the secret. It's not the systems. We're looking for the systems and strategies that they're doing. But without your mind being in a place that can think like they do, because they've removed those limiting beliefs and they've primed their vision into their mind, and they fully believe that it's possible, and they are taking every step toward it because in their mind, it's already done. They're just walking to it. It's 100% possible. And then we're back here struggling and striving and feeling overwhelmed and feeling like I'm not sure and I don't know if I can do it, and wondering why we're not getting there. It is truly crafted in the mind first, and in that process of changing the way you think, creating different thoughts, and ultimately priming those thoughts into your mind so that your brain starts fully believing in exactly where you're going. And when that happens, now you've got this big dream and vision, and now you have your brain working for you instead of against you. And it's just a matter of time for it to happen.
Yeah. Now, from you telling that story, I have to wonder where I got my crazy limiting beliefs that I had to work hard because, I guess growing up, like my dad taught me a work ethic, like working for him. But quite honestly, I was the kid who didn't have to work hard at school. I never worked hard. Even in law school, I didn't work all that hard. And somehow I got natural. Yeah, I was that kid, but somehow I did get that stuff. And I can't remember I don't think it was you who told this story, but I've heard the story told of like NFL receivers.
Yeah.
That, people will ask them questions and it's funny. They tend to miss easy catches more than hard catches.
Right.
And the reason why is because that's where they're more likely to, have a mental lapse. It's not a physical thing. It's purely a mental thing. And so it's interesting that, we all see that.
It really is. And for your entrepreneurs that are listening, I hope that this just really is exciting because if we're coming from the place that we don't know it and we have to learn it. Yes, you have to learn processes. Like, yes, they used a tactic and strategy. It's not that they're not important. They are, but they all work. Right. So it's just which car do you want to get in? The car's important. You've got to drive. Right?
Yeah, they all work and they all don't work depending on who's using them and how they're using them.
So that right there tells you it is the pilot or the driver, not necessarily the vehicle.
Yeah. Well, and so for listeners, let me give you a perspective on kind of what I've been priming as we're recording this. It's been about a month, I guess, Shannon, since we were together. Yep. And we all committed, or most of us at the mastermind, I think, committed that we were going to work on priming. And so that everyone understands, the way we did it with our vision was basically we had set a goal. Where do we want to be in, I think it was November, we said, or something like that. And I set a really weird goal. A lot of people, and Shannon, I don't remember yours, but I think a lot of people were setting revenue goals or things like that. And my goal was that I was going to take a 2-week vacation with my wife to Italy where I didn't work, because that would be a sign that I had done a lot of things right. And so I've been priming that and literally seeing myself sitting the last night of that vacation, having coffee and dessert, having not worked for 2 weeks straight. And the funny thing is, since then, when I started that, I had very little in terms of process in place, and the idea of doing that was impossible. Now, strangely, every time I'm doing something now, my mind automatically says, ooh, let's document this so I can hand it off to someone else.
Yes. That is your beautiful brain going to work for, and it's the greatest thing in the world because it goes to work for you.
Yep.
And we hear this, right? With super successful entrepreneurs, they say things that probably annoy us if we haven't taken our thinking off autopilot, honestly, because they say things like, oh, it's effortless. It's really easy. Just, show up and money just flows. And when we're down in that place of like all these beliefs that we don't know we have and they're running our business, that is so annoying, but it's true. It's like, it's really true when you get out of your way. And I love hearing this because that means your brain is like trying to figure it out. It is the most powerful secret weapon that you have. It's the most powerful competitive advantage you have. It really, really is if you get it working for you. And I love it. I got goosebumps when you said that because like I know because we, share the inner circle together, but it just seeing that it's not just which of course it's a great business decision to always duplicate and automate, of course, but how awesome is it that you have this goal that is pulling you toward that? Now it's a pull versus a push.
Yeah. And again, so I'd say just my intentions for the year were to systematize, automate, and delegate. Those were my intentions for the year. But I have to be honest, before I was doing this, it was always like, ugh.
Yeah.
And the idea of trying to do it was just so daunting. Whereas now I'm like, well, yeah, the idea is kind of daunting, but how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And so naturally, literally yesterday, we were talking before we got on, Shannon and I are both working on creating quizzes as part of our business. And I was talking, and I didn't tell you this, Shannon. I mean, last night I was doing something and I immediately threw on ScreenFlow and was just recording myself doing it so that I could, hand it off and people could create an SOP from it. So
I love it. That makes me so happy. And that's the kind of thing that starts to happen for you. And again, if you don't think you have automated thinking, then I'd love to challenge you tonight or in the morning or whenever you're going to brush your teeth next, to go pick up a toothbrush with your non-dominant hand and brush your teeth. You're going to quickly figure out that it is so automated. And I know brushing your teeth is a small one, but that just shows you how powerful it is, that when we grab it with the other hand, and we're smart people, it should not even feel different. It feels odd. It feels weird. And you have to think about it. And it takes a lot longer. So I would love for your listeners to do that. Just to prove to yourself that, wow, if brushing my teeth is automated, what else is in there that potentially I could shift that would get me to my goal so much faster and so much easier with so much more ease, like you do when you're brushing your teeth with a dominant hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a great task. I tried it after you mentioned that to me at some point. And I tried that. I was like, oof, you're right.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to dive into, you talk about limiting beliefs. And I think a lot of people understand what a limiting belief is.
Yeah.
But I want to dive a little bit deeper because I think, and it's all related to the ones you said, but essentially I think the most common limiting belief among entrepreneurs or people generally is, I'm not good enough.
Yes.
Imposter syndrome.
Yes.
Now, before we go into how they can deal with that and maybe kind of rewire, can you talk about some ways that maybe imposter syndrome is showing up and they don't even realize that that's what's going on? That there's external manifestations that is actually their imposter syndrome showing up.
Yeah. I mean, I think the key to understand is that your brain is not wired to make you an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Sorry to tell you, but it's wired to keep you safe and keep things really familiar, which is pretty much the antithesis of being an entrepreneur. So when you hold a belief or a block like imposter syndrome, which is really being afraid that you're not enough. And one of the things I've found by doing this work for the last 10 years is that most blocks, they really boil down to two different core pieces. They might not look like it on the surface. On the surface, it might look like I don't feel like I'm expert enough. But down at the bottom, really, when we dive into it, it's either I'm not enough or I don't have what it takes. Right? And so where this might be coming up in your life and in your business is when you're, thinking about going live, but you decide to pull back because so-and-so in your industry is going live at the same time.
Yep.
Or you know that you want to start a podcast or you want to start a show of some sort, and you know that would serve people. That's the thing that gets held in tension, especially heart-centered entrepreneurs that really want to make an impact. Like you really want to make an impact, but yet putting yourself out there, it feels like a threat. It feels like, and so the response is, well, I'm not smart enough. I haven't been doing this long enough. I am not enough of an expert. And it's a lie, because the reality is, if you have been through something once, you are more of an expert than the person who has never been through it.
Yep.
So if you've done it once, you are now an expert, but yet there's part of our brain that wants to not let us be threatened by not being enough and not having what it takes and being found out, right? So we're afraid that if we put ourselves out there with this expertise, somebody is going to say, the internet police is going to come along with a big spotlight and say, you're not enough of an expert. Go back in your hole, right? And that's just simply not true. It's just a construct that your mind has set up to keep you safe. And that's why you're doing things like procrastinating or setting a goal but not doing it, or feeling overwhelmed is a big one, because that's our brain's way of saying, okay, you want to do all these things, but you don't think your subconscious programming is, you're not enough. So I know what I'll do. I'll make you feel massively overwhelmed so you do nothing.
Yeah. Well, and listeners, I've told this story to some people and they can never believe it, but I'm going to tell you this to maybe make or help you get over this imposter syndrome. For a long time, I felt like, who am I to help online entrepreneurs with the legal stuff? I have a freaking Harvard law degree, and I had that limiting belief. Okay. Yeah. And so I just tell you that so that you understand it has nothing to do with whether you're good enough.
No.
It's purely your mind playing tricks on you. And, as Shannon, you'll get a kick out of this. I'm now Amy Porterfield's group. I'm one of the ambassadors, and I see these questions come up, and I'm often seeing now from like that one kind of episode you did with us at the first retreat, I'm seeing this limiting belief in all of these things. Like someone saying, well, I want to launch, but I don't have any testimonials yet. And I look at that and I say, that's you saying you're not good enough without it. And, I'm now always asking myself that question. And I still have limiting beliefs, the same as everyone else.
We all do. Yeah. And you get to a next level, and guess what? It's like an onion, you peel it back. But the great thing is if you do this process, right? If you really start to become the creator of your thoughts, you learn how to work this mind matrix around removing these blocks that are holding you back, and you start to prime your vision, then you gain a confidence that no matter what next level comes, no matter what situation comes up, that you have a process. Here's what I love about the way we're wired is it is truly a step by step process to remove the blocks. And it's also a step-by-step process to prime the vision to start to bring it to you. And for me, being a very process-driven person, like that makes me so happy, because before understanding this and really going and getting my PhD, it always felt like I couldn't, like it was a cloud. I couldn't get my arms around it, right? Like it was this personal development cloud that I can kind of get, but kind of not get. But when you really see how you're wired, and I always liken it to like a computer program, right? When you've got a computer program or computer and it's 4, 5, 6 years old, it starts slowing down a little bit. Maybe there's a virus in there and it's just not performing at the level that it used to, and it could. And we go in, we clean it up, we remove the virus, and we put in current programming, and it's like a brand new computer. Well, it's the same. It's the same with your mind. And that to me is so powerful. And knowing that you're not alone. I mean, Bobby, mine was I'm not enough. And who do I, what value can I bring to the world?
Yep.
And I've got it. So now you'll have tendencies. And so you'll need to watch out for those. But you get this really strong sense of confidence that you're seeing in those 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, because you know that no matter what comes, you have the capacity to become the person that thrives in that situation.
Yeah. Well, and I always get left and right brain mixed up, but but I love this because, this and a lot of what James teaches is what finally made the woo-woo stuff make sense to me.
Yeah.
Because I'm very much a scientist, very much a logical, rational person. And when you explained it, it immediately made sense. And so, that's what I appreciated about it the most. But let's talk quickly. How do you go about slaying the limiting beliefs? Slaying
the dragon. So there's 4 steps in the mind matrix, and we go deep into this in my academy with my clients. But the number one thing is realizing it. And here's the key. We remember our brains want to keep us safe, right? So where we hear, the one biggest question I get is like, I don't know. Oh, of course you don't know you have the limiting beliefs there. It's on autopilot. You're a normal person if you don't know what they are, right? That's normal. So your brain's done a great job at automating it for you. But when you're in stress, when you're in resistance, or when you're taking a risk, those beliefs become nice and loud and clear for you. So what we do as human beings usually is stress, resistance, taking a risk. We want to anesthetize, or we want to pull back from that feeling, that tension feeling. We don't want to hang out in that feeling. But I am going to tell you that it is your best friend, because if you can lean into that resistance and lean into that stress and lean into that risk and feel what comes up, you'll hear what the limiting belief is. You'll hear it really crystal clear, just like Bobby did. Like he didn't know what I was doing. And all of a sudden, boom, it comes to the surface. And not because we were putting him under tension, but we were putting him in a situation that he's not normally doing. And so that was where that was able to kind of bubble up to the surface. And once you identify what that belief is, the work becomes really getting it out of that subconscious. So you don't want to do this work in your head, because then it just kind of subtly cruises back to the subconscious and never, and keeps running your show. Yep. So you really want to write down what that limiting belief. So for me, when I was starting my podcast, it was, I'm not sure I have enough value to bring to the world. So I wrote down, I don't have enough. So you want to write it as you're actually saying it to yourself. I don't think I have enough value to bring to the world. So you write that down on a piece of paper, whatever comes up for you. And then as you're an adult, you're actually looking at something that was programmed maybe as a child, maybe as a young teenager. You look at that, because guaranteed, even if it's happening in your business now and that's why it's coming up, it's the programming started from much, much, much younger, and you didn't do it purposefully. So you read it out loud, and then you need to go into the lawyer side of things, which I love that we're talking, because you got to refute it. You got to put it on trial. And so you read it, and one or two things happen. Either you read it and you go, well, that's not true. Like your adult brain takes over and just goes, well, that's not right. And you start writing down what is right. So for me, I was like, well, I've helped entrepreneurs grow to 7 and 8 figures for the last 10 years. I've worked with athletes, and I've done all this research, and I have my PhD in neuropsychology. So I just started writing down the truths. But here's the reality. We also have this, it's kind of an archaic part of our brain that helped us when we were cave people, but does not serve us now. It's called the negativity bias. We're like 9 times harder on ourselves than we are anybody else, right? And that's why we can see it for someone else, but we can't see it for ourselves. So even if you feel like you've written down a decent amount of truth, I'm telling you, you haven't even scratched the surface probably. So I really encourage my clients, and they do this with resistance because they don't want to do it, but to think about the person that they love the most, and imagine, you don't actually say it, but out loud, whether you go to the bathroom to do it or you're in your office, you say that to them, hypothetically, not in reality. So I imagine saying, Max, my son, you don't have enough value to bring to the world. And then all of a sudden the truth really starts to pour out. So you just start to write down, the Southern mom in me, came up, and I'm like, I'm going to have a restraining order, I'm going to cut you, all those things. He's this, he's this, he's this, he's this. That becomes a mirror, because that is your truth too. And so now you have this arsenal of truth. And then in the same way that we primed your vision, Bobby, we now prime that truth, and we just see it as true. Again, we're building that neural network. So, here's the great thing is now you have this tool that when you are in a stressful situation and the thought starts to come up, you just say no, and you stop in that moment, and you prime into your brain exactly what's true, and you see it and you feel it until that feeling subsides, and then you move forward. And you got to trust the process, because that process is now laying the foundation for that new freeway or neural network to really let the limiting belief or that block thought, actually that freeway just starts to crumble somewhere between 21 and 67 days.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that, where the way you started that answer is talking about when you're under stress.
Yeah. Because
I think a lot of people don't realize that, but when you're under stress, you're going to see things about yourself that you wouldn't see otherwise. And, this happened to us at the retreat as well. And I mentioned that I've taken tests and I'm a high D on the DISC scale and pretty much only D. And I work on that. I work on being understanding, but you put me under pressure and under stress, and guess what? That bossy type A personality comes out again. So those personality traits come out, but also your limiting beliefs. So I think, and tell me if I'm wrong here, when you're under stress, that's when you need to be particularly attuned to what are the stories I'm telling myself that are negative.
Right.
And when you do that, then you're going to start identifying your limiting beliefs.
Yeah. And I really do want you to think of them as blocks.
Yep.
When we think of them as limiting beliefs, sometimes we think like, well, I didn't create that. I don't believe that, because you don't hear it. But if you think about it as something that just got programmed and it's blocking you, then of course you would want that block removed. So just think of it that way, and think of it about, it is the thing that's standing you in the way of what you want most in the world. Yep. So if you knew one thing, that there was only one thing, and we're working with so many entrepreneurs, thousands of entrepreneurs now, I do know that where people might feel like it's a big, or this might be hard to do, I'm telling you, first of all, it's super systematic and it's fairly easy. And it's like Lego-like process, right? If you can build Legos. Yep. But the reality is, once it's not this big, like, cascade of blocks. It's usually one little block, or maybe two at the most. And they might have tentacle beliefs that are attached to them. But once you get that one block out, the tentacles go away too. Right. So it's like you're so close and you don't even know it. And then you look outside of yourself instead of just getting rid of that one, maybe two blocks, and then the floodgates open. It's like the hose is kinked, and no matter how much water you flow through it, it's just not going to flow. But as soon as you get that block out and unkink that hose, it's success.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I can speak from my own, experience here. This isn't something that you're going to have to spend hours every day doing. You can dip your toe in and you'll start to see some results, and then kind of expand from there.
Yeah.
Now, Shannon, this has been fantastic, and I don't want to keep you any longer, but if my listeners want to succeed and get rid of the mental baggage that's stopping them, how can they find you? Where do they follow you? What should they do to get into your world?
Well, you can find me in all the socials at drshannonirvine.com and at Dr. Shannon Irvine on the socials, excuse me. But if it's all right with you, Bobby, I would love to offer your listeners a way to get a little exposure to this priming that's all around the beliefs that a lot of entrepreneurs hold, and allows you to prime in the truths. Right. And it is, I call it my AM and my PM brain priming for entrepreneurs. And it's passive. You just listen to it, and it goes after those big ones that most of us have at some point in time. And it really does support you in getting your toes wet and understanding that you really can program your brain to bring the things to you that you want most. And I'd love to offer that to your listeners, if that's all right with you.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. So that it's just something you listen to. We know that our subconscious mind is more susceptible right when we're waking up, and right before going to bed, and right after exercise, interestingly. So those would be the times that I would encourage you to use this. And one is geared more toward the morning, and one is geared toward the end of the day. And just give it a try and start to see where it shifts your thinking about what is possible for you and the future and what it holds for you.
Okay. And where can they get those?
You can, and we can drop the link maybe in the show notes, but it's drshannonirvine.com/mind your business.
Okay. Yep. They'll be there. I'll put a link in the show notes. And also, you actually have a transformation week coming up. What are you calling it that you have coming up?
Yeah, it is the 7-figure money mindset entrepreneur transformation week. So we are going after these money blocks, and we are going to help you transform your thinking into that of a 7-figure entrepreneur in this 1-week experience. Super excited about that. Certainly you can, I can give you the link for anybody who's interested in really diving in and shifting the way they think this year.
Yeah, definitely give a link if people want to be a part of that too.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that. And yeah, we'd love to have you there.
Okay, great. Yeah. So listeners, I'll get a link in the show notes to that, but I'm guessing if they get your freebies, they'll also get invited to that as well.
They will. They absolutely.
Great. Well, Shannon, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on.
So much fun, Bobby. And I just love your tribe and love everything that you're doing. So I'm going to be that goofy podcaster to say, make sure you are reviewing Bobby's podcast and giving him like the 5-star review and a really nice little comment, because that's like a super big hug for us podcasters. So make sure you do that for Bobby.
Well, I appreciate it. And so listeners, that's it for this episode. I'll see you back here next week for another episode of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.